guys, welcome to the Footy Notes podcast with me, Bonisile Ntlemeza. However, you may be watching, however, you may be listening. Match week 21 in the Premier League was a nuts one. Too many draws for those of us who like a win, but it's the Premier League. Teams are competitive. Everybody's got money, and everybody is able to stay in the game through defensive effort and then try to build from that, as we saw in Arsenal's 0-0 draw at home to Liverpool. Liverpool did basically the Unai Emery Aston Villa thing that they've been doing recently. They stayed compact. In fact, they were playing 6-2-2 or 6 with a box in front of them, like so 6 in the back, and then with a box of Wits and Soboslai, and then the two deep sitting midfielders in what's his name, Gravenberch and McAllister. So yeah, man, like it's a lot of draws. Not a fun game to watch. Arsenal Liverpool. It was actually quite a horrible game to watch from the Arsenal side, because I thought the boys would step up and give Liverpool the business. To be honest, I thought they were going to give them that work in that first half. They tried, but I don't think anybody expected Liverpool to do what they did to that extent. They set very deep, very disciplined. Arsenal were threatening, but not enough to make Liverpool sweat. They had territorial advantage. They were playing the Liverpool half, most of that first half, and they were finding themselves getting more and more frustrated as the game kind of evolved. And I think Liverpool would be the happier of the two teams, considering that they were, the visiting team, and they were without three important players in Salah, Salah, the two strikers, Ekitike and Isaac. I mean, Isaac is a long-term miss, so I'm sure they were obviously expecting to not be with him in this game, but they might have been hoping Ekitike would be available. But it turns out he wasn't to be available, and yeah, Liverpool did what they needed to do. But what's interesting for me in the aftermath of this game, the way people are kind of like looking at it or analyzing the game, it's from a point of view of like disappointing Arsenal performance, and I was disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. Watching that game was hard, and it was frustrating live. But I made myself watch it again. I don't know, maybe I'm a gluttony for pain or whatever, glutton for pain. But when I watch it again, I see basically the halftime flips to more of Arsenal becomes Liverpool. And some people walked away from that game last night talking about Liverpool were the better team. It's interesting how low a bar for teams who play against Arsenal is for them to be considered to have had a good performance against this Arsenal team. And I guess maybe that's a sign of how good Arsenal have become, like that, not being embarrassed by them, and you performing like a champion who has basically £100 million player as your false nine and an £80 million player playing next to him. Like, you get away from that kind of performance without any criticism. That I find that quite puzzling, to be honest. I find that really, really puzzling, that Liverpool gets a lot of praise for showing up to the Emirates and doing what they did. I get it. Arsenal is the favorite. Arsenal is supposed to be the one forcing the issue. But in my view, like, I still think you're playing against a champion. That's a fact. Liverpool is a champion. And and there's a lot of talent in that team. So like when I look at that team, I'm not seeing scrubs. You know, they have Van Dijk who can lead a defense. And when you're defending with all 11, Van Dijk is one of the better people to have in your team. Konate and Van Dijk were very well protected on the day. Alisson hardly had to work. And I'm sorry, like I just don't see it the same way some of my friends and fellow Arsenal people saw this game. I think this game was a lot more even than it felt when watching it. Yes, Arsenal huffed and puffed in the first half. Liverpool had most of the second half um, in their ascendancy, but then Arsenal kind of closed the game a little bit because Liverpool played with the same 11 guys pretty much until Conor Bradley got injured. So I think the view of this game, we won't be able to tell if this was a point loss, 2 points loss, or a point gain until May. However, you're playing against the champions. They come to your house and they literally just six at the back, 2-2, with the quality they have going on the other direction. Like, I think people are within reason to be frustrated and be upset, but to call that performance disgraceful, considering also like the weather conditions, I think it's a step too far. I don't think this was a disgraceful performance by Arsenal. And yet people are doing the same thing they did against Manchester City. In fact, this game is very similar to what happened in Anfield. The difference is that at Anfield, the sun was shining. It was like August or something. And yesterday, it was pissing down with rain. And you can't tell a story of this game without looking at the weather conditions. And you also can't tell the story of this game without really looking at what Liverpool were doing. Like, two teams get to play and, both teams get to do tactics. And in my opinion, I think you can't just place the onus of like making the game exciting on one team. That's just not how this thing works. You can be critical of Arsenal for whatever if you want to, but I still think Liverpool's approach to the game impacted what Arsenal were able to do. And so, what can Arsenal do? Like, look, pound for pound, player for player, I think Liverpool had Gakpo was a 40 million pound purchase, 200 million pounds in Wirtz and the German Wirtz and Soboslai, 30 something to 40 million pounds on the right wing in the right back who was makeshift right wing on the day, Frimpong. And then you have two midfielders who were in the championship winning team last year in what's his face, the Argentine with the Dutch kid in the midfield, right? Gravenberg and McAllister. So like you have basically the bones of the champion team that Liverpool had last year in this performance. You have the two center backs, you have the goalkeeper. If a team with that much talent comes to your house and says, you break us down, I mean, you know, it's not something that I think Arsenal should get away with scot-free. I think Arsenal had a lot that they could have done better in this game. However, I think Liverpool were definitely contributors to what we saw in terms of like they were there to frustrate, and they did. Um, but there were some things I liked in this Arsenal performance. I liked that the right hand side of Bukayo Saka and And Jury and Timber continued to try and make the game go in Arsenal's favor. Like we kept finding joy on that side of the pitch. Leandro Trossard had moments. He had a bit of a rope to walk, a tight rope to walk, because of that early yellow card, because he's a player who likes to play on the line. And so he had to watch himself, you know. He got a little bit too comfortable swearing at the referee a few times for a decision that didn't go his way. I didn't like that. But Liverpool had done a good job. Like when you stack six players across those attacking positions, there's very little a team can do besides maybe take risks dribbling and doing a little bit of that. And we saw most of the times Arsenal, like the 3 or 4 times Arsenal were able to get at Liverpool was a dribble from Saka, a dribble from Trossard one time when Zubimendi steals the ball that I think was meant for Saka. He kind of shows up and intercepts it in a way that, you know, he can't control it. I don't think he's doing anything wrong by stepping in there Timber style. But that ball was probably meant for Saka there with the power that it was hit, and Zubimendi was so close. I don't think so. Trossard would have seen him making that run. He kind of shows up in the picture very late. Liverpool deserves praise. You know, they're the only team to keep Arsenal quiet, stop Arsenal from scoring goals in two games this season, basically. And I think that was a 0-0 too, or a 1-0 game at Anfield. These teams do at the season anyway have done what Arsenal and City did about a couple of seasons ago, where they did a lot of shadow boxing and trying not to concede ground to the opponent. There was a lot of that. Upsetting if you're of the Arsenal perspective. You want Arsenal to, you want Arsenal to win every game they play in. What the hell's going on here? Excuse me, guys. Um, that was weird. So anyway, like I think the long and short of it is, if you are Arsenal, you you take the point and you move on. And I think you have to be happy with that based on the way that second half went. Arsenal didn't have an answer, not really. You know, they played okay, um, but not well enough, I think, to have been upset to not have won that game. And you have to praise the champion. Like there was pride at stake for Liverpool here. Liverpool came, you know, on a 7 or 8 unbeaten run as a team, and I think you kind of have to praise that. You can't be mad at it. They were, in my opinion, very competitive, very compact, and they recognized that they couldn't play 90 minutes. First of all, because they didn't have enough in terms of like players to come off the bench to help. And secondly, I wish Arsenal some games, not sit deep, but I wish Arsenal would go some games with a midfielder like we did with Eze and Marino. I think Arsenal needs to do a little bit more of that until Gyökeres finds a degree of familiarity with how to play with this team, until this team knows how to set him up a bit better. But like, I feel like most of these first halves with Victor Gyökeres go down the drain because dude is not levels. He is not synced up with his teammates, and unfortunately, like you can only go so far defending him for his contributions whilst not scoring goals or helping create goals. He finds ways to get himself marked a lot more than he evades defenders. He is definitely not somebody you can blame for effort. This is not an effort issue. It's a player quality issue with Gyökeres, I think at this point. There were some very good crosses from Saka, from Rice, from Trossard, corners where, you know, he could have made himself a bit more of a handful. And it doesn't seem to be clicking for him and his teammates. And he's played now over 20 games, I think. So Arsenal, Arteta, they have to do something about this. You can't continue with this guy the way he's going. Not at this point, you are just exposing him to further difficulty. The more desperate he gets, the more it looks maybe that it's not going to happen. I'm not saying we should not play this guy again. I don't think he's unusable as a player. I do think, however, he is a player that needs a lot of help. He needs some building up. It's crazy because he's coming from a very successful last couple of seasons, you know. But it feels to me like when we got Kai Havertz from Chelsea, and Kai looks like a broken player. Victor looks broken sometimes when he's out there playing. He's giving his all, but I don't see it, man. It's not happening for him. And the manager has to find a way at this point, in my opinion, to play Saka and Madueke because that's the best three available forwards at the moment at Arsenal. It's Madueke, Saka, and Trossard. Those are the best three. And maybe if you don't want to use Martinelli in the midfield, Martinelli in the midfield, sorry, as a striker, you have to find a way to play your most informed forwards. Just go from there. I know there's patterns and all this thing. Gyökeres is not giving you any of that. And Gabriel Jesus is not a 90-minute player at the moment. So either you start with Jesus and give Gyökeres 30 minutes at the end of games where maybe his strength can be an advantage because he's playing against tiring defenders. But I'm not sure Jesus should be playing 60 minutes every 3 days because of how injured he's been, and he needs time to build up. Like maybe in late February, March, he can start playing more regularly from the start. But before Havertz is back and before Jesus is fit, Arsenal have to create a front three that doesn't include Gyökeres from the beginning of games. Either you play Saka as a centre forward and play Madueke on the right, and you go with that for a few games, see how it works. Because I don't like the idea of Saka on the left as much as I like it, the idea of him in the middle as a false nine. Well, you can keep it as it is, with Saka on the right, Madueke on the left, but who are you playing in the centre forward? Maybe Trossard, maybe Martinelli. Because Martinelli can give you a lot of what Gyökeres gives you. A better pressing, much better pressing. And he actually knows how to play with this team. At this point, I really think you should just give Martinelli a run in the team. He's available, he's fit. And then not to discard Gyökeres, but you buy him time to come in and make contributions from the bench. And he can watch the game a little bit from the sideline and like really study what the defense is doing and where he can make impact. He doesn't seem to be a player who gets better from within the game at this moment. He doesn't seem to be that guy. And there were a couple of things that I liked about this game. And one of them was every time there was some kind of argy-bargy, some kind of drama that was burbling, Declan Rice being the guy right up there, being the senior statesman, being the leader. And this is not a shot of at anyone, but a compliment to Declan. He was the one standing up to Van Dijk and all these guys whenever there was something happening. I remember Liverpool was getting a little precious about Arsenal not kicking the ball out when Frimpong was hurt, and he was legitimately hurt. But Arsenal were not duty bound to stop playing. Like you play, the guy is not a head injury, and it's the referee who's supposed to stop the game. if there's danger to a player. So Arsenal did what they were supposed to do. They kept playing. And to be honest, I don't understand what the big deal was. But Liverpool made a point to get confrontational about it. And Declan was right there saying, mm-mm, mm-mm. It's not a head injury. Like he stood up for his team. I like what I'm seeing from him, like the intangibles as well as the tangible play that I see. Like Declan Rice this season, if Arsenal win the league, Declan Rice is most likely going to be PFA Footballer of the Year, Football of the Year, which is like the biggest individual gong in England. He is just finding new levels every season, and it seems to be that he gets better as the season progresses. He did have some good moments in this game too. A cross that was not met by any Arsenal player. He had a couple of nice little like runs and on the ball, and obviously defensively he always gives you, a solid 7 to 8 out of 10 almost every game. But his growth as like the team is this is my team kind of player. It's immense for Arsenal, and he is definitely becoming as totemic for this team as Gabriel is, and I like it. I really, really like it. And there's room for Odegaard to do his leadership thing the way he does it. There's room for Zubimendi to be a leader technically the way he does his thing. There's leaders in this team, all around. Timber is a leader. Saka is a leader. Congratulations on that contract, by the way. I woke up to see those news from Ornstein and Ben Jacobs, both of them saying Saka has signed an extension with Arsenal till 2031. That's good news, man. Like, all is not lost for this team. They've been dealing with injuries for basically the first half of the season, and yet they still sit at the top, 6 points clear. And yes, all is not guaranteed, but this is a position you want to be in if you're Arsenal. However, I think they do need to do themselves a favor and figure out that front line. That front line is at the moment a problem for Arsenal. Like the fact that Arsenal is the only team to not have a top scorer in the top 15, top 20 scorers in the Premier League. That's a worry. And not because I think the players are incapable, but I think there's something not working with that front line that your top scorer is on 5 goals for the Premier League. And that's Gyökeres and Trossard. They both at 5 goals. Saka and Rice at 4 goals. Like, that's too low for this time in the season. Like, all of these guys have played about 20 games or close to 20 games. You want to be scoring a little bit more, from your front line players. And it's worrisome that's the case. But there's time to figure it out, it's nice to figure it out from a position of winning, from a position of we're top of the league. But figure it out they must. And maybe you play Eze as your striker at this point. And maybe that's the other shot. You don't move Saka to the middle, and you don't move Madueke. You just stick Eze in there as your false nine. And that's how you get Eze and Odegaard in the team. Because at this point, like, I don't understand like the persistence with Gyökeres. I really don't. I think Gyökeres would benefit from a spell like Eze has just had. Eze has had to wait for 4 games in the Premier League to even get a kick from like the 78th minute in this last game. I think a little bit of that for Gyökeres is now in order. It is. It's nothing personal. It's nothing against the player's effort. I think the player is trying his best, but he needs help from the coaching team. And at this point, the more games he plays from the start, that it costs the team, then the management team has to look at themselves. Like, you can't persist with this guy, not beyond what we've seen here. He is not finding any joy. He's not finding any joy. I think in this game he had like 8 touches or something like that. And you don't need your striker to be a high touch striker. But when he's not scoring goals and not like doing anything to affect games in the opposition's defensive box, you need him to be a bit more involved in the game. And his involvement is too off ball for my liking. And I'm sorry to make this the Gyökeres rant podcast, but something needs to be said about this at this point. And Arteta, I know he has the answers for almost everything, but this one, he has to figure out something very soon. And I think, yeah, like the game was a bit of a wash. You know, there were a lot of draws in throughout, you know, in this round of fixtures in the Premier League. Manchester City, like, drew 2 games, actually 3 in a row now, right? They drew their last couple games, and you can't expect Arsenal to win all of their games. They were going to drop points, so when they do drop points, you can't be losing, you know, your marbles over it. And let's look at the Premier League table real quick. Yep, Manchester City have drawn 3 games in a row. Like, this is not a joke. They drew Sunderland, they drew against Chelsea, and they drew against Brighton. 3 draws in a row. Liverpool, 3 draws in a row. But yet, out of this game, all the talk is about Arsenal drawing 0-0. Liverpool 0-0, 2-2 Fulham, 0-0 against Arsenal. They did a 0-0 against Leeds at home. No one is talking about that. Liverpool has a lot of talent in this team. A lot of talent. Expensively assembled talent. So you can't like really give breaks to rival teams, and then you come for Arsenal, who has won 5 of their last 5 games before this one, and then they draw a game on the 6th game when the defending champion comes to your house and plays 6-2-2 for most of the first half, and then start to get better because they're a champion team as the game progresses. Like, other teams get to do tactics too. The only other team that's done well in the last 5 games here, like next behind Arsenal, is Brentford. They've won 4 of their last 5, drawing only to Tottenham. And then Newcastle on a bit of a streak right now, and man, it was unlucky. It was gutting for Leeds to lose that 7-goal thriller at St James's Park. They had played so well, and they led a couple times. To go away to Newcastle, scored 3 goals. Go away to any ground, scored 3 goals. You don't deserve to lose, but football is a cruel game, and it was a very, very, very late. It is the latest winner in the Premier League this season, 103rd minute or something like that. So Newcastle, you know, on a bit of a streak. Leeds will consider themselves unlucky, but this round of games, like with match week 21, was draws galore, man. Like, a lot of these games were just weird games. And if you look at Nottingham Forest beat West Ham, Bournemouth beat Tottenham 3-2, Brentford beat Sunderland 3-0. That was a surprising result. But how about that Igor Thiago though? And Fulham beat Chelsea. And then outside of that, 0-0 Crystal Palace, Villa, 1-1 Everton, Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolves should have found a way there. They were playing with 9 men at some point in that game. 1-1 Manchester City, Brighton, 2-2 Burnley, Man United, 0-0 Arsenal, Liverpool. Like, too many draws in these last couple games. And I think no one will talk about this, and this is not an Arsenal excuse or an Arsenal plug. This is me just speaking about the fixtures and how they are kind of diluting the quality of football we're watching. And no one wants to hear it, nobody wants to talk about it, and it sounds like an excuse, especially when you're speaking about your team. But this is not an excuse. Like I think Arsenal definitely um need a bit more respect, in my opinion, from Arsenal fans. Outside player people and players don't need to do that. But I think as Arsenal fans, like when you watch the global state of the league, like when you watch not just Arsenal games, you will see that like the rest of the Premier League has come up. They have quality in the Premier League is good, and teams can now stay in games, and everybody can defend. And we saw yesterday a clinic of that. And Arsenal defended in the second half. No one is going to talk about this, and it's not something Arsenal will be like beating their chest about. But they are the first team, I think, in about 10 years or something stupid to stop Liverpool from having a shot on goal. Liverpool didn't have a shot on target in this game. I know they had the one that hit the bar. It's not a shot on target. So like basically, Riot didn't even have a lot to do, even though some people would have you believe that Liverpool were the better team, which I think that's a stretch. I think both teams had a half where they were better, but Arsenal had a lot more touches in the opposition half. I think we had 24 touches in their box, sorry. 24 touches in their box versus I think 11 for them in our box. We had we had our times in the game. Just sometimes in football you're not going to win, and that's okay. And I think people need to just get over it. Anyway, I hope this one finds you well. We move, guys. Arsenal will be fine. I think as long as they figure out that frontline thing, though, they really have to figure that out. That's the one part of the team I'm not worried about Miles Lewis Kelly. And one last thing before I go. Arne Slot, good man. The outrage that people were kind of manufacturing against Gabriel Martinelli, who had no clue that that kid was injured. Martinelli had no idea that kid was injured. The fact that people are coming at him talking about that's disgusting, disgraceful, and all of that. Football players do this. Football players do this all the time. And Connor Bradley does inch himself back onto the pitch. He does. He was hurt right on the line. He could have lied down, but he wanted to stop the game. Martinelli wanted to keep playing. He wants to get a winner for his team. It's competitive. It's the 94th minute. You want to win the game for your team. And so yes, he shoved. Again, Martinelli has come up online and said, me and Connor have exchanged, messages. I've wished him well. I didn't know he was hurt. My bad. He's owned it. He's not a malicious kid, but people coming at him like disgusting this, disgusting that, blah blah blah. Bro, if you watch football, football players do this shit all the time. They fake injury, especially when they're under pressure. So Martinelli is not a fortune teller. He's no psychic. He doesn't know. He really didn't know. And you know what? I like the spirit. I'm sorry for Conor Bradley. I am. I don't think two things can be true here. What Martinelli did was wrong. But for people to say, he's injured, like that, no one knows, guys, in that moment. And yes, this speaks to what the players have created. That thing that Martinelli did is created by players. Players are doing this all the time to con the ref. So sometimes there's a lack of trust. And yes, bad read from Martinelli, terrible read. But for people to come at him the way they did, ridiculous. Ridiculous. Liverpool were getting pressures for Arsenal not stopping a play when one of their players was hurt. An Arsenal player gets hurt later on in the game. What did they do? They kept playing. Now we can say they were retaliating, but if they're as incensed as they were about a team not stopping, why did they not then show example of like, oh look, you see, when you guys are down, we put it out. Football players are always looking for an advantage. So yes, it didn't work out well for Martinelli. It's bad optics. Leave it alone, guys. The players have talked. Arne Slot said it best right after the game too, because I saw the media were trying to fucking find a way to go at the kid. Like, it's competitive sports. Stuff's gonna happen. Anyway, I'm gonna be leaving it there. Leave Martinelli alone. Peace.